Every environmentally sustainable practice on your farm has to have some financial reward to it. I mean, there's no point in being environmentally sustainable at the cost of financial sustainability. So whether it's using your fertilizer more efficiently, to use that more efficiently brings obvious financial rewards, but it has sustainability awards in that unused fertilizer isn't ending up in a watercourse. There's always a financial benefit to any of the environmentally sustainable practices we have taken on the farm.
Getting recognition from your peers for a job well done puts a smile on anybody's face. Farmers know the sustainability challenges in their area, and tillage farmers are no different. Last year, Tillage celebrated with one of their own who won the country's top Environmental Sustainability Award. You are listening to the latest episode of the Tillage Edge with me, Michael Hennessy. If you really enjoyed the series, we'd really appreciate it if you could follow the podcast and leave us a review on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcast from. I'm delighted to be joined today by Don Summers, a tillage farmer from Wexford, who won the overall Teagasc FBD Environmental Sustainability Awards in 2025, and Siobhán Kavanagh, Communications and Engagement Specialist with the Signpost Farm Programme. We'll chat about what made Don's entry stand out, the judging and application process, and how you can get involved in the 2026 awards. Siobhán, you're very welcome to the podcast. You might first tell us about the Teagasc FBD Awards, the important deadlines for the application, the prize fund, that kind of thing.
The Teagasc FBD Environmental Sustainability Awards, this is our third year running them, and it's launched since early January. And I suppose just maybe to give a background as to why we're actually doing this, there's a couple of key objectives around these awards. The first one is to give recognition to farmers that are making a huge effort on their farms to improve environmental sustainability, while at the same time continuing to produce good quality food profitably. And that's important. And I think Don would say this himself, even that, he's getting the recognition on behalf of other farmers that are also doing a really good job. So that's important to us. And then it's to promote that environmentally sustainable farming amongst other farmers and encourage other farmers to take on some of the actions that farmers like Don have taken on. And then the last piece then is to create awareness amongst the general public about what farmers are doing. And I suppose there's been a huge amount of negative press maybe around this area, and we want to put out some of those good news stories. And that's been a big part of our promotion of stories like Don's, particularly in last year's awards, getting this out to the general public and encouraging the general public to engage and see what farmers are doing. There's very generous funding coming from FBD, and we're very thankful for them to be on board with this. So the prize fund is €30,000. We have 6 category winners, and I'll go through the categories in a minute. And each of the category winners win €4,000 each. And then the overall winner is picked from one of those 6, and they get a top up of €6,000. So the overall winner is getting €10,000. So, it's a nice prize at the end of this for the overall winner, and even for the category winners, €4,000 is not to be sneezed at. So there's good funding behind it, which is very positive. So we have 6 different categories. We have a category for reducing greenhouse gas emissions, a category for improving water quality, enhancing biodiversity, improving soil health. For organic farmers, then we've separated them out into their own category. And then for a farm maybe that's diversifying their farming system to improve profitability, but also to improve environmental sustainability. So when I talk about diversification, it's not necessarily maybe cottage industries like agritourism and those. It's probably more looking at solar energy or a biogas plant, or has put in extensive forestry, or some of these technologies that are good from profitability point of view, but also good for the environment. So there are the 6 different categories. What we would say to farmers that are thinking about applying for this is that, even though the prizes are around categories, we assess the farm on a whole to begin with. So that's really important. So who can apply? All of the main enterprises can apply. So dairy farmers, beef, tillage, sheep, and then other enterprises like pigs, poultry, forestry, horticulture can also apply for it. So really, anybody that's working in any farmer in the agri sector can apply for these awards. Our closing date is the 27th of February, so that's coming fairly rapidly. We've 16 days to the closing date, so we would be encouraging people to get in their application form as soon as possible. Fundamental to these awards, Michael, and I think it's important to say this, that technical efficiency and profitability have to be visible for these farms to apply for these awards, because we have to be able to demonstrate that commercial farmers can be technically efficient and profitable and at the same time look after in the environment. And FBD likewise would be very strong on this from the very start with the launch of these awards. So that is important, that the technical efficiency is there, and also that there's evidence of profitability of the farm. And then there's the elements that we'll actually judge the farm on for the awards.
And so, you talked about, I suppose, differentiating firms in terms of there's different enterprises to a degree, but there's also some of the, you talked about solar panels or the other kind of, I suppose,
Yeah.
investments that people might have on the farm. But in that sense, it doesn't necessarily have to be. There can be lots of other innovations there as well. What sort of things will the judges be actually looking at when they come to the farm eventually?
So when the judges visit the farm, what they're looking for is the progress that the farmer is making in the different areas. So what have they done to reduce their greenhouse gas emissions on the farm? What have they done to improve water quality? What's their understanding of water quality in the local area? What's the status of the local river? What are the challenges to the local river from their farm? What technologies have they adopted, and their understanding of those technologies and the importance? And it's not even just there could be things there historically on the farm that have always been done. Say the hedgerow one. So they could have really good hedgerows, but they've never improved the hedgerows. Like, we're looking for progress having been made, not necessarily just the status quo has stayed the same. Things are good anyway on the farm and I haven't necessarily changed them. We want to see where progress has been made, and that's kind of important. So when we're assessing the farm on the farm visit, we're looking at the technical efficiency, and then we're looking at those different categories. So reducing greenhouse gases, biodiversity, water quality, soil health, and diversification. The organics one obviously would be all the same categories. But it's trying to figure out a farmer's understanding and their motivation and the progress they have made in adopting technologies. And I suppose that's where Don comes in. He's made huge progress and has huge understanding of the technologies that are required to improve the profitability of his farm, but also to improve the environmental sustainability.
Okay, great. And with that, Don, again, congratulations to you for winning the overall award. But just for people who might know you, you might just describe just a little bit about your family, the kind of the setup you have on the farm and your kind of enterprise there at the moment.
Yeah, I'm a full-time pure tillage farmer in County Wexford, so we've no other enterprise other than tillage on the farm. I farm in an informal partnership with my uncle, who historically farmed in partnership with my father, but when my father retired, I took over that. So we share, the workload, we share machinery, we farm the farm as one unit, but we have two separate we're two separate farmers, but we work together. So it's all tillage. We'd have a fairly wide range of soils, and we have a variety of crops on the farm, from winter oilseed rape, winter wheat, winter barley, winter rye, winter oats, through to some spring cropping like spring barley, spring beans, spring oats, and a pea bean mix that we've been trying for a couple of years. So we try to have a wide rotation as possible, because there's benefits in that from control of weeds, and from getting first wheats in for profitability point of view. But there's also benefits in that we have a wide variety of soils. Certain ones suit spring cropping, certain ones work better in winter cropping scenarios. So we try to get as wide a rotation as possible.
So Don, just in terms of, and Siobhán mentioned it earlier, it's practices out there from an environmental point of view, but look, at the end of the day, it has to be a financially rewarding enterprise to make any of those changes, to make sure, there is an income for you and your family. Is there any particular ones that come to mind for you in terms of the changes you've made over the last little bit of time, in terms of the sustainability on one side, but it's also kind of financially rewarding on the other?
Well, I think every environmentally sustainable practice on your farm has to have some financial reward to it. I mean, there's no point in being environmentally sustainable at the cost of financial sustainability. So whether it's using your fertilizer more efficiently, like on a tillage farm, fertilizer is the biggest cost you have, the biggest input you have. So to use that more efficiently brings obvious financial rewards, but it has sustainability awards in that unused fertilizer isn't ending up in a watercourse. From the point of view of diversity on the farm, or biodiversity, having a wide variety of crops brings biodiversity advantages. But then there's also schemes, whether it's acres or the farming for water EIP, that if it's a certain measure, um, like putting in a grass margin beside a water course, it mightn't bring a direct financial benefit from the point of view of cropping, but you can be paid for that through acres, through the EIP, to compensate for maybe the loss of production, which would be very small to be fair, but there's always a financial benefit to any of the environmentally sustainable practices we have taken on the farm.
Just in terms of chatting to the judges, before you found out you were the winner, but afterwards as well, do you think there was a practice or a number of decisions which you made on your farm that carried fairly decent sway with the judges?
From talking to some of the judges after, I think having a knowledge of what was going on the farm, why we were doing what we were doing, but also recognizing where there were shortcomings on the farm, where there were, like, no farm is perfect, least of all mine, but I did acknowledge where improvements need to be made, and I spoke about the measures that we were planning in the future to address other issues. I think that helped as well. It wasn't just, what we had done in the past and what we're currently doing, but a recognition of what needs to be done and where there's room for improvement. I do think that helped us in the judging process.
Okay, so there's a recognition. I think Siobhán said it earlier around it's a journey that any particular farmer is on. It's not all going to happen under 1 year. So it's it's good that was picked up. In terms of your application process, and again, Siobhán mentioned a little bit earlier, did it take, or what was involved in that? Did you find it difficult? Was it something that you got a little bit of help with?
I entered the competition in its first year in 2024, and I'll be honest, I left it the last day. I scribbled down a few things, sent in an application which wasn't particularly good, and I, unsurprisingly, wasn't shortlisted. I didn't expect to be. For the 2025 application, I never in a million years expected to be, a finalist or a category winner or an overall winner. But I said, if I'm going to do this, I may as well do it properly. And I had a look at the application form, earlier in play, and I sat down and I wrote out, answers to the questions on it. And I actually surprised myself when I gave it a bit of thought of all the actions that I'm doing on my farm. And I don't think any other tillage farmer is any different in that you're doing lots of things on your farm already, and sometimes you don't, unless you sit down and look at them, you don't kind of give enough weight to the environmental benefits that they're doing. So I think doing it earlier, giving yourself a bit of time, and writing out all the measures that you're doing on your farm. It wasn't a terribly difficult process, but I think, like anything, if you give yourself a bit of time or a bit of planning, it's a lot easier than, trying to rush through it and not giving it the attention that it deserves.
And it's good that you found the the process beneficial in your own mind, in terms of all the actions that you are actually doing that have environmental benefits. So it's like in anybody's job, when you sit down and reflect on what you've done over the last little while, it's amazing. You can sit up and kind of say, we've achieved a lot. Siobhán, just in terms of support for people filling in the application, is there any support available from the Signpost Farm Programme, or maybe Teagasc in general, to help farmers to do this?
I would encourage farmers, if they are applying for the awards this year, to seek out your advisor. It could be a Teagasc advisor, it could be a local advisor, to do just what Don has spoke about, is creating that list, because you'll remember a certain amount of things yourself, but sometimes a fresh set of eyes looking at your farm and say, but you've done this and you've done that. It's a bit like an application form for a job. Sometimes you don't always see everything that you've done and the amount of work that's been done on the farm. So I think a fresh set of eyes on it, whether it be a Teagasc advisor, we've encouraged all of our advisors to assist with farmers applying for these awards, and it does make a difference. And I would see it in applications that come in, the ones that have, I suppose, put the time in to put the details on the application form and have maybe got a little bit of help in it. You can see the difference, and I think that is critical. And Don hit the nail on the head. Like, I was going to say that there have been people that have applied in year one, didn't get through because there wasn't enough details in, but came along in year two and put the details in and were shortlisted in one. So you do need to put that detail into the application form. We're not going to know every farmer in the country. We're not going to know their details. So Some of the resources to help you as well, maybe like we have the tillage 12 steps, and that identifies the technologies that you can take to reduce greenhouse gas emissions on a tillage farm. If you go down through those and identify the ones that are relevant to you, but put data behind them. So if you've improved your soil fertility, will give us the status of the soil fertility on your farm. If you've reduced your chemical nitrogen use, tell us how much you've reduced it by. If you're incorporating chopped straw or you're using catch crops, give us an idea of how much that you're using. We can only judge or shortlist the farms based on the information that's given on the application form. And it's a little bit different to maybe the livestock enterprises where we have ICBF data that we can go and look up. We're probably a little more limited on the tillage side that we don't have that access. So, the more detail you give me looking at the form or in the form makes it an awful lot easier for me to do an assessment in terms of shortlisting. But absolutely, go to your advisor, go to your meat processors or meat processor, go to somebody that will look at your farm through a separate lens and identify maybe some of the gaps that you haven't identified yourself.
So listen to there, Siobhán, it's the common mistake is people kind of almost, when they're writing out this, they almost assume that people should know your farm, but obviously we don't, and they're not putting enough detail down.
No, and like we know Don's farm. We knew Don's farm in the first year of the application forms, but we can only go by the information that's on the application. So don't assume that even if we do know your farm, that we know the details of it. We have to go by what's in front of us from a transparency point of view.
So just to both of you then, and maybe Don, you might come to you first, in terms of, do you have maybe a place to start or a piece of advice for a tillage farmer who's planning to apply for the awards in 2026?
I suppose go into it with an open mind, as Siobhán said, get some advice from your advisor. I suppose I had the benefit of, by being a Signpost farmer, I had a lot of that data there already. That was an advantage. But I mean, AgNav is there. That can give you a very good indication of your greenhouse gas emissions per tonne. And you can go back and look at historically what your greenhouse gas emissions were. And you can see the difference that maybe chopping straw, or in a year where you had a better nutrient use efficiency, the benefits that brought to yield. You can see the benefit that brings to your greenhouse gas emissions per tonne of grain produced. So there are some resources readily available there. There's soil tests there. You can look back at your historical soil tests and see what way your fertility on farm is going. So, the information is there. It just, you need to give it a bit of time to seek it out. And when you write it down, I think any tillage farmer that goes through that process will see benefits maybe they didn't realise how good a job they were doing.
And Siobhán?
Yeah, I'd say pull out the resources that are available to you. So the 12 steps for reducing greenhouse gas emissions. There's 7 steps there on the water quality side for the Better Farming for Water campaign. And look at those and see, well, which of them are relevant to me? Which of them really make sense to me? You also have a soil health guide that was produced from Johnstown Castle recently. Again, that'll give you a guide to what are some of the actions you should be taking around soil health. And if you are diversifying your farm system, give us the details on it. But you need to give it the time. You need to spend time creating those lists first, and then go and look at the application form and put in as much detail as possible. And I think it's the detail that is lacking. And I would say if people have put in an application form previously, there's no harm in going back and look at that application form and see how you can improve on it. There's no issue with applying 2 or 3 times, but just see where the gaps were maybe in your previous application.
Okay, brilliant. So Siobhán, you might just finally remind listeners where they can find the application form, some guidance notes, that kind of thing, to help them fill out the forms.
Yeah, so full details on the process are on the Signpost webpage at www.teagasc.ie, and that'll give you the terms and conditions, who can apply, closing dates, and the application form. So any details that are there. And if you're still unsure of anything around it, drop an email to signpost@teagasc.ie or call into your local Teagasc office if you have questions around the application process. We're absolutely open to supporting people to get as many applications in from the tillage sector. So don't be afraid to come forward if there are questions and you're unsure of what's required.
That's brilliant, Siobhán, and we'll put up those details on the show notes at the end, so you'll find them there as well. So Siobhán and Don, thank you very much for joining me on the show.
Thank you, Michael.
Thanks, Michael.
Teagasc are holding the last of our 18 seminars in Donegal next week, Friday the 19th. And our final in the series of outdoor winter crop walks is held next week in Dublin. Full details of these events are available at teagasc.ie/events. So finally, if you enjoyed the podcast, then recommend it to a friend or colleague. And as always, rate, review and follow on Apple or Spotify so you never miss an episode. And for more information, go to teagasc.ie. I'm Michael Hennessy. Thanks for listening, and I'll be back next week with more tillage news and advice.